I, complex numbers. Now first, let's talk just a second about what are complex numbers. Well, complex numbers sometimes are called imaginary numbers, and we write them in standard form as a plus bi. However, a and b are real numbers. That means when we see this, instead of having the letters a and b, we're actually going to have numbers right there. The I itself is the imaginary unit. So we would have, a number plus or minus a number times I. So think of that I almost like the position of a variable, except it has value. We know that I squared is the same as -1. And this is why they are imaginary, because we all know that you can't square something and get a negative, but I squared does equal -1. So here we go. All right, let's do some multiplication. First, we're going to take -3i and multiply by the binomial 5 minus 2i. Now this works just the same as any distributive property problem, where we have this -3i on the outside and we want to distribute it through the entire binomial. So we're going to take that -3i and multiply by 5. Then we're going to take that -3i and multiply by -2i. When we do that, we end up with -15i, because -3 times 5 is -15. And then the -3 times -2 gives me a +6. And I times I is I squared. Well, we aren't finished with this problem, because remember, I squared is -1. So where you see that I squared, we're going to substitute in that -1. So we end up with -15i plus 6 times -1. So let's simplify. 6 times -1 is -6. And then we put that in the front, because remember, a plus bi means the constant comes first. And since our constant is -6, that starts, and then that -15i. Remember, a negative and a minus sign are essentially the same thing. So we have that piece there. Okay, let's go and do one more. Now we are multiplying two binomials. So 3 plus 2i times 1 plus 4i. Well, we're going to basically just do the same thing. We're going to use the distributive property. So first we're going to take that 3 and distribute it to the second binomial. So 3 times 1 plus 3 times 4i. Then we're going to take that +2i and distribute. So 2i times 1, 2i times 4i. Then we are ready to simplify. So 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 4i is 12i. 2i times 1 is 2i. And then 2i times 4i is 8i squared. So once again, remember that I squared is the same as -1. Okay, so instead of 8 times I squared, we're going to have 8 times -1. When we simplify that, so we have 3 plus 12i plus 2i minus 8. Now let's put it together in standard form. 3 minus 8 gives us a -5. 12i plus 2i gives us 14i. Constant comes first, and now we have our answer in standard complex number form: constant plus coefficient times I.